and make sure it's, okay, perfect. Okay, all right, so we're good to go. All right, so guys, here is your practice midterm. Your actual midterm is going to look very similar in question type and in the question order. So your first 6 questions are going to be from test 1. So if you need to replace test 1, these are the 6 questions you're wanting to get right. Now, it's going to look just like this. It says, use the given point on the terminal side of your angle to find the value of the trig function indicated. So I want you to find what cosecant of theta is. I give you this point, 5, negative 20. So the first thing I would do is plot that point. So I know that positive 5 and negative 20 is this point that's right there. And so then my angle is this reference angle right there. So to do this, I would just do Pythagorean theorem to find the hypotenuse. So I would do, and be careful with your signs, I do 5 squared plus negative 20 squared equals c squared. The biggest thing, guys, is make sure that you put that negative 20 in parentheses before you square it. And so hopefully if you do that correctly, you should get 425 is equal to c squared. And then to solve this for c, just take the square root of 425. Now, here's what you have to be on the lookout for. You have to ask yourself, well, can I simplify that any? Turns out you can. You can break down 425 into 25 and 17. And so when you do that, we know the square root of 25 is 5. The 17 gets left behind, so that gives me 5 radical 17. Now, it wanted you to find cosecant for this scenario. Cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. So for this problem, you would get 5 radical 17 over negative 20. Now, remember, your test is going to be multiple choice. So use that to your advantage. 5 radical 17 over negative 20 is not going to be an answer choice. The main reason is because I can divide both of these things right here by 5, and so that would give me 1 radical 17 over negative 4. Or you could just write that as radical 17 over negative 4. But that would be your answer for that one. We good so far? Make sure y'all looking at me. I didn't know if I made a mistake. So holler at me, guys, if I make a mistake somewhere and mess up. All right, so that's number 1. Remember, use the multiple choice answers to your advantage, okay? All right, so that was number 1. All right, for number 2, if you want to, get ahead of me, you can go ahead and look at the next question. But here's number 2. For number 2, you will have some problems like this. It says find the exact value of this trig function, secant of negative 510. The first thing I notice is that negative 510, so I want to get a coterminal angle to that. So I'm just going to add 360 to that twice, and that gives me 210 degrees. Now, again, a lot of people stopped on this on the test yesterday, and it hurts you because there was no multiple choice. But since it's multiple choice, that's not going to be an answer choice. What you do next is figure out what quadrant that angle is in, and 210's in quadrant 3, and then find the reference angle to that, and then that would be 30 degrees. So there's my 30-degree angle. Drop the perpendicular. Across from the 30 is going to be 1/2, and that means this is root 3 over 2, and the hypotenuse is 1. Be careful. What do you have to watch out for? Yeah, so put those signs there. Make sure they're negative. Secant is hypotenuse over adjacent, so that's going to be 1 over negative radical 3 over 2. Again, use the multiple choice to your advantage. Obviously, if there's not a choice that has radical 3 and 2 in it, then something must be wrong. But even more so, I couldn't leave it like this. I'd have to stay, change, flip, so I'd get 1 times negative 2 over radical 3, which would give me negative 2 over radical 3, which I can't leave like that either. I rationalize it, so my answer should be negative 2 radical 3 over 3. But again, if you look at the choices, you probably, and more than likely, will be able to pick out the right answer. So I think you'll be okay with that. So that's secant of negative 510. I do think you have 2 of these problems on the test. I'll double check. Let's see what the next one is, and we'll just confirm that. I think one of them you have to convert first, but we'll double check first. All right, so that's number 2. All right, for number 3, it is. Okay, so this one is about the same process. The only problem is that this is in radians. So the first thing I would do is I would convert this into degrees. So I would multiply that by 180 over pi. The pi's crossed out. And so this would give me cosecant of 855. Now, obviously on the test, that wouldn't be an answer choice because you're not done. You got to get a coterminal angle to that. So I'm going to subtract 360 twice, and that's going to give me cosecant of 135. And Ms. Thomas, the only thing is accelerated pre-calc, we go to test 5 instead of test 4. All right, so that's 135. But yeah, so the cutoff for them is 24. All right, so 135 is in quadrant 2, So I'm going to just draw that. So quadrant 2, that's 135 degrees. Find the reference angle of that, which would be 45. And so then 45, remember, it's radical 2 over 2 for all the sides, hypotenuse of 1. The only thing you got to watch out for is your sign. So make sure that this is a negative right here for radical 2 over 2. But I don't even think you need that to do cosecant. Cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. So that will be 1 over radical 2 over 2. Again, that's not going to be an answer choice. You got to stay, change, flip it. So you'll get 1 times 2 over radical 2. So you get 2 over radical 2. Let me put stay, change, flip for y'all. And then you can't leave it like that. Multiply by radical 2. Here's what's funny. You get 2 radical 2 over 2, but then what happens with the 2's? Cross out, yeah. And I think some of y'all have done this enough that you can just look at it and know that it's going to be radical 2. Hey, if you can do that tomorrow, I don't care. You just got to get either A, B, C, or D. It works for me. But that's the answer for number 3. That's radical 2. So, all right, so for number 4, let me go to that one. So for number 4, still test 1. Number 4, pretty straightforward. I'm going to give you an angle and ask you to find the reference angle. So remember, 275 is, this is where I'm going to get you. 275, this is 0, 90, 180, 270. Do not put 275 in quadrant 3. 275 is in quadrant 4, which means I would do 360 minus 275, and that would give me 85 degrees, which that is my answer. Because remember, by definition, a reference angle is any angle that's less than 90. So as long as your answer is less than 90, you're good to go. So that was the answer to number 4. All right, for number 5, I think it's one of the A-Smart Trig class. It is. All right, so that's right. For reference angle, you never have a negative answer, and none of the answer choices will be negative anyway. All right, it says in which quadrant is, and this is what probably throw you off, it says cosecant is less than 0. Guys, that means where cosecant is negative. Where tangent is greater than 0, that means where tangent is positive. So those are what those symbols stand for. I'm going to look at A-Smart Trig class. Now remember, where people messed up on this, both of these things have to happen. So I'm going to start with the first one. Where is cosecant negative? Now keep in mind, cosecant goes with sine. So where is cosecant negative? Well, sine is positive in 1 and 2. So sine would have to be negative in 3 and 4. So I went ahead and scratched out 1 and 2 because these are my 2 answer choices. Now of these 2 answer choices, where is tangent positive? There's only one place that happens. That's in quadrant 3. And so that would be the answer for number 5. Quadrant 3 would be the answer. Not quadrant 3 and 4, just quadrant 3. All right, the last one for test 1 is number 6. And here's what that problem looks like. It says find the exact value. We already did one of these a while ago, so it's just a double problem. First thing you would do is convert this into degrees. So multiply that by 180 over pi. And so when you do that, you should get, 90 times 3. You should get 270. And this is what's interesting. You're going to get secant of negative 270 degrees. Now, again, that's not coterminal. It's not between 0 and 360. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 360, and that's going to give me 90 degrees, secant of 90 degrees. Now, I'm going to pause for a second because here's the thing. You know that 90 degrees is not a triangle. Where's 90 degrees at? It's on the line. So here's my suggestion to you guys. If you know it's on the line, don't try and worry about that X, Y, R definition. Even though I know y'all probably could look it up and it's going to be on the formula sheet, just type that sucker in the calculator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in secant of 90. Now here's the key, guys. Make sure your calculator is in degrees, because if it's not in degrees, you'll get a wrong answer. But type in secant of 90, and my calculator spits back at me undefined. So I would not try and trouble yourself using the X, Y, R. Just type in secant of 90, and that'll give you your exact answer. And if it wasn't undefined, it might have given you 0 or 1 or negative 1, but still, just use that for that one. And that's going to clear out test 1. So if you can get those 6 questions right tomorrow, you're good to go. What you got, Ansley?
Our calculator needs to be in degrees.
Correct. I will tell you, I do not think any questions on here your calculator needs to be in radians. So I will, when we go through all these questions, I will double check. But just to repeat, I don't think any need to be in radians. I think if you hold it in degrees, you'll be good to go. Yeah, that equaled undefined. That's right. And just use your calculator, call it a day, and go from there. All right, test 2. Moving on to test 2. All right, test 2, this was all about right triangle trig. So sine, cosine, tangent, all those trig ratios. For this one it says, find the measure of the side. So remember, we're not going to do inverse because we're trying to find the side. So here's the angle I give you, 31.1 degrees. Now, if that's the angle I give you, that means that the 9 is the adjacent, ADJ, and then the x is the hypotenuse. Now, so since I know adjacent and hypotenuse, I'm going to use the trig ratio, cosine. So I'd write cosine of 31.1 degrees equals adjacent, which is 9, over hypotenuse of x. And so now you can just simply put this over 1, cross multiply, so I'm going to get x cosine of 31.1 is equal to 9, and then to solve this for x, divide by cosine of 31.1. And so that'll give me my answer for x. And I'm going to work that out for you. So 9 divided by cosine of 31.1, you should get 10.5. And that would be the answer for that one right there. What you got, Brendan? I was about to say that. That is true. With everything that I've taught you thus far, you technically could use law of sines to solve this. However, before you could do law of sines, wouldn't you have to know what this angle is right here? But you could find that easily, because if you know this one and this one's 9, you just add them together, subtract from 180. So yeah, with what I've taught you, you could solve that with law of sines very easily too. It is okay. All the formulas will be on the formula sheet on the first page. So yeah, you'll be fine.
So as long as we get the right answer.
Correct, right? Because it's multiple choice, so as long as you pick out the A, B, C, or D, you'll be good to go. Okay? All right, now, number 7 was all about finding a side. Number 8, though, is actually about finding an angle. So, again, you could use law of sines for this as well, because you could pair up the angle with 8 and the 11.7 with that angle, but I'm not. I'm going to use the trig ratio. So here's the angle that I need, that angle right there. So that makes this opposite and this adjacent, which means that I'm going to do tangent. So this is my adjacent. So I'm going to say tangent of my angle is opposite, so 8 over adjacent, which is 11.7. Remember, whenever you're trying to find an angle, that is the only time you do inverse. And so you're literally going to do tan inverse of 8 divided by 11.7, and that should give you 34.4 degrees. And the answer choices are going to be so far off that you'll be able to pick. You don't have to worry about one being 34.3 and one being 34.5. The answers are going to be spread out that you know which one is the correct answer. So no worries about that for number 8. All right, for number 9, your problem was similar. It's just I didn't draw the picture for you. So this one you're going to have to draw the picture, draw you a right triangle. Now remember, you can't assume it's a right triangle unless I tell you, and I do tell you that angle C is my right angle. If you mess up on this problem tomorrow, it's probably because you didn't label angle C as the right angle. It doesn't matter where you put A and B, but it does matter where we put this stuff. So side B is 8, angle A is 73.4 degrees, and it wants you to solve the whole triangle. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to find missing angle B, which will be 90 minus 73.4. So this angle right here will be 16.6 degrees. And let's be honest, if I went ahead and looked at all 4 of my answer choices, if there was only one answer choice that had angle B as 16.6, I'm not going to waste my time. I'm just going to circle that and call it a day. But I'm going to go ahead and finish solving this for you. So I'm going to use angle A. So I'm going to say, let's say I want to find side A. This would be opposite. So I would say tangent of 73.4 is opposite, which I don't know what that is, so this will call that A. So opposite, so A, over adjacent, which this is my adjacent side right here. It's 8. So A over 8. Do what you've been doing. Put this over 1, cross multiply. You get 8 tangent of 73.4 is equal to side A. So I'm going to type that in. 8 tangent of 73.4. That gives me 26.8 for side A. Now again, you probably could just go through your multiple choice answers. You probably could use Pythagorean theorem if you wanted to on this other side, but I'm not. I'm going to say opposite and hypotenuse, call this C. So I'm going to say sine of 73.4 equals opposite, which we just found was 26.8, over hypotenuse, which is C. Same thing, put this over 1, cross multiply, so you get C sine of 73.4 equals 26.8. And then just know you got to divide by 73.4. Make sure you put that sign with it, right? And so then you're going to get 26.8 divided by sine of 73.4. That gives me 28.00, so I'm okay with just 28. And that's good to go. Again, you might not have to waste all that time to solve that. You might get it right on the first one, just pick that answer and you're good to go. But that's number 9, just drawing the triangle and doing it the same way you've been doing. All right, moving on, number 10. For number 10, it says, now this is what's key because a lot of people missed this on test 2 when I did it. If I do not tell you it's a right triangle, you cannot assume that it's a right triangle. So nowhere in there does it say right angle. It tells me that angle A is 75. It tells me that angle B is 40. It tells me that side A is 33. It wants you to find side B. So I can't assume any of those angles are right, so that means I have to use law of sines. Now if you notice, I'm going to pair this up. Side B is going to be paired up with sine of 40. Side 33 is going to get paired up with sine of 75, and that's my law of sines. Now cross multiply, so you get B sine of 75 equals 33, sine of 40, divide by sine of 75, and that's going to give me my answer, so I'm going to put it right here. So 33 sine of 40, and then divide that by sine of 75. That gives me 21.96. You really could just go ahead and round that up to 22. Doesn't matter, but that would be my answer for number 10. But just the biggest thing, guys, if it doesn't say it's a right angle, you can't assume that it's a right triangle. You use law of sines without a doubt. All right, that's number 10. Number 11, I think, is similar. It's just want you to find the angle. So let me show that to you. Yep, it is. All right, again, can't assume it's a right triangle because it doesn't say anywhere in there about a right angle. So I'm just going to label it A, B, and C. So angle A is 88 degrees, side A is 11, and side C is 5. Thankfully, the angle it wants you to find is angle C. And so I'm going to set this up using law of sines. So 11 over sine of 88 equals 5 over sine of C. Now keep in the back of your mind, you're trying to find an angle, so you know you're going to do inverse. You know that. So cross multiply, you get 11 sine of C equals 5 of sine of 88. Divide by 11, and here's where the inverse comes in handy. Make sure you do sine inverse of 5 sine of 88 over 11. And I'm going to do that. So sine inverse of 5 sine of 88 over 11. You should get 27 degrees as your answer for number 11. And so just remember sine inverse. And again, it's multiple choice, so if you didn't get that answer or close to it, you know you did something wrong, so just go back and type it in and you'll be good to go. All right, the last question that'll clear up test 2 is number 12. And here's number 12. It was on your last test yesterday. It's going to be on your test tomorrow. Here's the thing, guys. I'm going to go ahead and tell you this. You know how many answers should you end up for any one of these problems right here? 2. If you have an answer choice that has 3 answers or just 1 answer, you might as well just go and cross that sucker out. You know you're going to have 2 answers. So how do you get it? You're trying to find an angle, so do sine inverse of negative 1/2. And so I'm going to do sine inverse of negative 1/2. My calculator shoots back at me negative 30 degrees. Well, I know that won't be one of my answer choices because I have to find a coterminal angle to that, so I get 330. So I know 330 is one of my answers. And again, if you can do that with your multiple choice answers, go ahead and get it. Why not? Just go ahead and get your answer and go on. But A Smart Trig class, sine is negative in quadrants 3 and 4, so I knew that one of my answers is 330. That's the one that's in quadrant 4. The reference angle of that is 30 degrees. Draw you 30 degrees in quadrant 3, do 180 plus 30, and I get 210. So that would be my answer for number 12. Yep, what you got? If you can get all 6 of those correct on test 2, then you'll get that grade replaced with 100 as well for test 2. So just remember, 2 answers for that one. And do a Smart Trig class. Why what? This is a long pause, folks. Okay. Okay, all right, so A Smart Trig class, sine is negative. Well, sine is positive in quadrants 1 and 2, so that means my 2 answers have to be in quadrants 3 and 4. Okay. All right, good question. All right, let's move on to test 3. All right, for number 13. Now, test 3 was when we introduced area formulas, law of sines, ambiguous case, law of cosines. So here's the first one. Yes, you'll have all the areas for formulas tomorrow, but it says find the area of this triangle, and I noticed that I give you all 3 sides. So that formula, remember, is k is equal to the square root of S times S minus A, S minus B, S minus C, where S is you add up the three sides, so 5 plus 9 plus 8, and divide that by 2. So 5 plus 9 plus 8, divide that by 2, that gives me a K value of, an S value of 11, and so I'm literally just going to plug this in my calculator. I'm going to have 11 times 11 minus 5 times 11 minus 9 times 11 minus 8. And again, just type that into your calculator, and you should end up getting, double check me though, you should end up getting 19.8997. Why don't we just call that 19.9? And that would be the area of that triangle. And again, you don't have to memorize the formula, but you do need to know which formula to use. So if I give you all three sides, use that square root one, S times S minus A, and all that, and just find S first. So that's good to go. All right, number 14, I bet, is another area problem with a different formula. It sure is. I think I give you one of each. So this one, it says find the area of this triangle. Look what I give you. I give you two sides and only one angle. So that formula is the one that has 1/2 AB sine of C. That's the formula. Now, remember, it doesn't matter what letters I give you. You know what my angle is, so that angle is going to go right there. So here's what I'm going to have. 1/2 times 6 times 8 times sine of 64. The biggest thing I'm worried about is make sure you use sine and not cosine, but since you've got the formulas, I don't think that y'all will have a problem with that. If you type that in, you end up getting, let's see, that's going to be 0.5 times 48 times sine of 64, and you should get 21.6, and I'm just rounding that, but that will be the area for that one. And so that was good practice for it. I think there's one more area, and it's the last formula. A lot of people missed this one yesterday on the test, and only it's because of the one little trick with the formula that y'all forgot. And let me see if I show it to you. So, yep, for this one. I'm going to draw this triangle so you can see it better. This is the only one I'm going to draw it for. But if I draw out triangle X, Y, Z, what I give you is this is angle 134, this is angle 28, and the side I give you is this side, side X. Now, here's the thing about this formula when I give you two angles and the side. Whatever side I give you, its angle goes in the denominator. That's what you got to remember. So it does matter. So here's the formula technically. 1/2 A squared sine of B sine of C over sine of A. That's technically the formula. And so whatever side I give you, its angle goes right there. Well, the thing I need, though, is I need that third angle. So I'm going to go ahead and say 180 minus 134 minus 28. So that gives me this angle right here, which is 18 degrees. And so I've got everything I need. So here's what I have. 1/2 times the side I give you is 8, so squared. When you type this into your calculator, guys, this is what's most important. Make sure you hit the times button after that, because if you don't, it's going to mess up this fraction. So hit times, then make the fraction, and put sine of your other two angles, which are 28 and 18, and then the angle that goes in the denominator is the one that the side is given. And so if you do this, you should do sine of 28, and make sure you do those parentheses because that matters, and then go down and do sine of 134. You should hopefully get about 6.5 for your answer for that, and that would be perfect. So that's one of each of your area problems. That's 3 of your 6 problems right there. So this test was all about areas and law of cosines and ambiguous case. So I bet the last 3 questions are going to be along those lines. So let's take a look at number 16. All right, for 16, I bet it's ambiguous case. It says solve the triangle. So I'm going to draw a triangle, can't assume it's right, and I'm going to label it. So angle C is 31 degrees, side B is 34, side C is 31. It is ambiguous case because I give you two sides and an angle. So in the back of my mind, there might be a second triangle, so I'm going to go and label that with an angle that's 31 degrees here, this is 31, and this is 34. Well, in red, I'm going to go ahead and solve this. In red, I have to find angle B, because in order to use law of sines, I got to do that. So I'm going to do 31 over sine of 31 equals 34 over sine of B, because I'm trying to find an angle. I know I'm going to do inverse, so here's what I would have. I'd have sine inverse of 34 sine of 31 over 31. And I'm literally going to approximate this to the nearest whole number because it'll just be easier that way. Type it in, and then you should get, rounded to a whole number, 34 degrees. And so this is 34 degrees. Now, I do have to solve the rest of this triangle, but I need to go ahead and test to see if there's a second one. So I'm going to go ahead and test for my second triangle. The way I do that is take the answer you just got, subtract it from 180. So subtract 180 and 34, you get 146. Add the given angle, which was 31, and if it's less than 180, which sure enough it was, there's your second triangle angle B for this one. So I'm going to put 146 in that measure right there. So I do have two triangles. Again, if it were me, I would go ahead and look at my multiple choice answers and just go ahead and rule out which one I can pick. But I'm going to go ahead and solve the rest of this for you. I'm going to change this to change it back to black. All right, so I'm going to add these two, 34 plus 31, subtract that from 180. That'll give me 115 degrees for this one. And then over here, 146 plus that 31, and subtract that from 180, you should get like 3 degrees for that one. And then you just got to finish finding your side for each one of these, and I'll do it really quickly up here. So for this one, I would have A over sine of 115 equals 34 over sine of 34, cross multiply, so you're going to have A is equal to 34 sine of 115 over sine of 34. And so if I do that, so you're going to do 34 sine of 115 divided by sine of 34, you would get 55.1 for that one. And then over here in blue, you would do A over sine of 3 equals 34 over sine of 146 plus you, and you should get, for A, you'd have 34 sine of 3 over sine of 146, and so 34 sine of 3 divided by sine of 146, you should get 3.2, and that would be this right there. Now, again, guys, tomorrow, if you don't want to work out the whole thing, you might be able to go ahead and get the answer just with a couple of your first steps. So if you don't want to waste your time doing all of that, just look at the answers. Let them be a helpful guide for you. And that's going to cover, nope, we still got two more, I'm sorry, 17 and 18. All right, so let me keep on going. Test 2 still. All right, so for number 17, it says solve each triangle. Just by looking at it, I know that this is going to be a law of cosines problem, because what I see here is I give you 3 sides. Now here's what's key about this, if you remember. You always have to find the biggest what first? Angle, right? So 18 is B, A is 30, 17 is C. I have no choice, guys. I've got to find that angle first. Got to find the biggest angle first. So law of cosines will be given to you. I'm going to write it out for you. This is going to be 30 squared equals 17 squared plus 18 squared minus 2 times 17 times 18 cosine of A. Now, again, this is the one y'all didn't like. It's because it takes longer to do. So we're going to do some arithmetic. So 30 squared is going to give me 900. 17 squared is going to give me 289. 18 squared is going to give me 324. And then I'm just going to multiply 2 times 17 times 18, and that gives me 612. And so that's what I've got so far. I'm going to combine these two numbers right here together. So 900 equals, I'm going to say 289 plus 324, and that'll give me 613. Most common mistake, you cannot subtract these two right here because this is with cosine. What I can do, though, is subtract 613 from both sides there. So 900 minus 613, that'll give me 287 equals negative 612 cosine of A. Again, divide both sides by negative 612. And remember, you have to do the inverse here, guys, because this is A, angle A. So do cosine, I'm running out of room, cosine inverse of that. So I'm going to type in cosine inverse of 287 over negative 612, and that gives me an angle of 118 degrees. So this angle right here is 118 degrees. Now, here again, if you would go ahead and look at your answers, you might can go ahead and get your answer right off the bat, but I'm going to keep on working it. So now I'm going to use law of sine. So I'm going to do 30 over sine of 118, and I'm going to do side B. So B, 18 over sine of B. You've got to find the angle again, so you're going to do sine inverse of 18 sine of 118 over 30. And then if you type that in, so sine inverse of 18 sine of 118 over 30, that gives you angle B of 32 degrees. And then, again, you can add those together. So 32 plus 118, subtract that from 180. You should get 30 degrees for this one right there. But again, you might could save time tomorrow and not have to do all that just by looking at whatever angle you get for the first one, and you might can get your answer for that. All right, the last one, and we'll be through with test 3, is number 18. For number 18, you know I told you you're going to see this problem to the end of time. When you see this problem, do law of cosines. It doesn't get any harder than that. So I'm going to just go and get straight to the point. This is what you'll type in. The square root of this number, but make sure it's squared, plus this number, make sure it's squared, minus 2 times both of those numbers again, cosine of the angle between them, which is 10 degrees. But you literally, that's it. Just type in 220 squared plus 120 squared minus 2 times 220 times 120 times cosine of 10 degrees, and that gives you 100 and... Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You're welcome. All right, you get 103.9 miles. And years from now, when somebody watches this video, they'll know that Stokes Moore got signed out in my pre-calculus midterm practice. Okay, anyway, all right, so keep on going. So for 18, that's it for that. All right, that takes care of number of test 3. Now, where people probably do want to replace is these next two tests. Test 4 was all about graphs. So let's go through our graph section. So starting off with number 19. So for number 19, here's what you have. Now, unfortunately, guys, I can't arrow down any further than that. I can't go down to see choices C and D. So let's just pretend, now on the test tomorrow, it will be multiple choice, so you can pick out the right one. But let's just pretend I had to do this on paper on my own. So I want you to graph this function. Here's what I would suggest you do. First thing is identify the midline. My midline is at 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and say this. If my midline's at 2, I know for beyond a shadow of doubt, answer choice B isn't my answer, because where's the middle at on that graph right there? -2, right? So I know it ain't that one. So here's what I do. I would graph the middle. So here's how I'd graph it. So my middle would be at 2. So I'm just going to put a dotted line right there at 2. The next thing I would do is I'd look at my amp. Well, there's no number here. What's the understood number that's right there? 1. So that's my amp is 1. So I'm going to go up 1. And so there is my maximum. Go down 1. There's my minimum. So there's my border. So that's what I'm looking. So in reality, guys, answer choice A is looking pretty good right now. Because see my midline's at 2. It went up 1 and down 1. So that's looking pretty good. All right. Now let's talk about my period. Understood value for K in this problem is 1. You don't need to memorize the formula. It's 2 pi over K. So that'd be 2 pi over 1. So my period is 2 pi. So it hasn't changed. So it's still 2 pi, and then all this. So here's what you got to remember, the pattern for sine. It starts at the middle, goes to the maximum, middle, minimum, back to the middle. So there's the pattern for sine. Now, I'm being very liberal with this. I'm not drawing a solid line because what's the last thing I got to take into account? Phase shift, right? So phase shift is negative C over K. C in this problem is negative pi over 2, so that's going to be pi over 2 over 1. So that gives me pi over 2, which means I shift all these points which direction? To the right, right? Pi over 2. So this point in green is going to be right here. This point in green is going to shift over to right there. This point will be shifted over here. This point over here. And this point over 1. And so in solid blue, there's my answer. Well, sure enough, that is actually, that's it right there. That's answer choice A. I didn't have to look at C and D, but that's it. That's it. And so again, what I would do, guys, is find the midline first, and I would scratch out whatever answer choices aren't where the middle should be, and then go from there, and you'll be good to go. Now, for this replacement, you're going to have one that's a sine graph, but you're also going to have one that is a cosine graph. And so we're going to do the same thing for this one. All right, so when I see this graph, my middle is at -1, so I know that I'm going to have a midline at -1, so there's my midline. It's got an amp of 4, so I'm going to go up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, so there's my max. And a 1, 2, 3, 4, so there's my min down there. Now, so right off the bat, again, I can go ahead and rule out answer choice B because there's no way that's the graph because my amp is 4. So if you notice, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, this is a good contender for it right here, but I'm going to double check it. All right, if you notice my period for this one, I understood 1, so 2 pi over 1. Again, the period is still 2 pi, so 1, 2, 3, 4, so it's still 2 pi. The pattern for cosine starts with the max, middle, min, middle, max, and then again, I'm going to be very liberal, not going to actually do a solid line. There's my pattern, but the last thing I got to take into account is my phase shift, which is negative c over k, which in this case will be pi over 2 over 1. Well, that would just be pi over 2 again, which means I'm going to shift all those points in red to the right. So this point in red is going to be right here, this point here, this point here, this point here, and this point over here. Now I can do a solid line, and I bet, let's see here. Sure enough, right there, right there, right there, and right, sure, that is it. Now I'm not saying it's going to be like that for you, but thankfully enough, I didn't have to look at any of my other answers, so that's it for my answer for that one. So that would be the answer for number 20. All right, now, the rest of it was going to be just being able to identify the characteristics of it. So I'm going to go ahead and go to number 21. All right, for 21, very straightforward, guys. All this question is asking is for you to state the period. That's it. So go look on the formula page, 2 pi over k. Now, here's the mistake that people are going to make. Do not say that it's 2 pi over 3, right? Because k in this problem is not 3. What is k in this problem? That's it. So you'll have 2 pi over 1/3. Thankfully, since this is multiple choice, that will not be an answer choice, right? Stay, change, flip. You'll get 2 pi times 3 over 1, so that gives you your period of 6 pi. The reason why I've always put this question on the midterm is because if you take what's called the CLEP exam, this was actually one of the problems on the CLEP exam. A CLEP exam is a test that allows you to get college credit for a college class, so I've always put that on there. But that's it. That's it. Don't waste any more time on it. All right, for 22, this wants you to find the minimum. Now, guys, I want to say this. I could go either way on the test. I could ask you for the maximum or the minimum. So this is just asking the minimum, but it's done the same way. To find the minimum, remember, you take your midline and you subtract your amp. That's how you find the minimum. And if you need to write this down, you can. But the way you find your maximum is you do your midline plus your amp. But we're trying to find the minimum. So my middle is 3/4. My amp is 1/4. If I subtract them in my calculator, your calculator is going to give you 1/2. So that will be my minimum. I do know that's 2/4, but that does reduce to 1/2. So again, it could go either way. It could ask you for the maximum. Just know you can do either one. That's great. All right, for 23, it wants to know what the phase shift is. That's it. Just pretty straightforward. What's the phase shift? So the formula for that is negative c over k. In this case, be careful, c is negative 2. That's going to be 2 over k in this case is pi over 4. As weird as that looks, I still need to stay, change, flip it. So 2 times 4 over pi. Nothing crosses out, guys, so I just get 8 over pi. And as weird as that looks, guys, that is your answer. Don't get that confused with 8 pi. That's not the same thing. Don't get that confused with pi over 8. That's not the same thing. The answer has to be 8 over pi. All right, one of the last questions to clear out this test is actually writing an equation given the information. So far for the past 3 examples, I asked you to tell me what the information was given the equation. So now, let me give you the information and you write the equation. So again, multiple choice, but none right here. But it says write an equation which represents, and I tell you, it's a positive sine graph. So off the bat, I know this is what it's going to look like. A sine of k theta plus c. I know that that's what it's going to look like. Now let's go through the motions. It says it has an amplitude of 6. Let's go ahead and put that in, and we can go ahead and probably narrow down some of our answer choices. So that's that. The next thing I see is that it has a vertical shift of negative 5. I want to go ahead and take care of that too. So this is going to be k theta plus c minus 5. All right, what I need to take care of now is my period, which is 4 pi. Now, I can't say that that 4 pi goes in for k. Remember, you got to solve for k. So its period is equal to 2 pi over k. So my period is 4 pi equals 2 pi over k. Put a 1 up under that sucker, cross multiply it, you get 4 pi k equals 2 pi. Divide by 4 pi's, the pi's cross out, so you get k is equal to 2 over 4, which is 1/2. So we got k. And you know what, while I'm here, let's go ahead and find my phase shift. I'm going to do it up here. My phase shift is negative c over k. My phase shift was told me was pi, so I'd have pi equals negative c over k is 1/2. To solve this for c, I would just put this over 1, cross multiply, so I'd get 1/2 pi. I'm running out of room here, guys, so I get 1/2 pi equals negative c. To solve this for c, just divide by negative 1, so that tells me that c is negative 1/2 pi, or you could say negative pi over 2. But there's my value for c. And so here's what I'm going to have. Y equals 6 sine of 1/2 theta minus pi over 2 minus 5. But in reality, guys, you might be able to get your answer choice just after you find the period and all that other stuff. Use the answer choices to your advantage. All right, that takes care of test 4. The last one, the home stretch, the last test, test 5. This was all about trig identities. So here's what your questions are going to look like for this replacement part. So for 25, it says, use the angle sum or difference identity to find the exact value of this. Now, if you remember, I told you when I see that 5 there, 45 goes off in my mind. So I'm going to say cosine of 105 is 60 plus 45. The formula will be given. It's going to be cosine of 60, cosine of 45, minus sine of 60, sine of 45. And you can go back and double check me, but I do know beyond a shadow of a doubt that sine and cosine of 45 is radical 2 over 2. I also know that sine is opposite, and opposite of 60 is radical 3 over 2, and then cosine of 60 then would be 1/2. If you do the arithmetic, you should get radical 2 minus radical 6 over 4, and that would be the answer for 25. Pretty straightforward, sine or cosine, sum or difference. I could ask either one, doesn't matter. So that's 25. For 26, I think it's similar. I'm not sure. Let's take a look. 26, it wants me to find sine of 2 theta. Again, you don't have to memorize the formula. The formula would just be 2 sine of theta, cosine of theta. But the problem, though, is I don't know what sine of theta is. So here's what's given. This part right here tells me I'm in what quadrant? Third. That's right. So I'm in the third quadrant, and this is my angle. It tells me that cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so that's going to be 24 and 25. Remember, the hypotenuse can never be negative, so that has to be my negative 24. If you do Pythagorean theorem on this, you should get a value of 7, and it should be negative 7 because you're going down, so that's negative 7. So cosine is negative 24 over 25. Sine is negative 7 over 25. So a lot of people were getting confused yesterday. You don't put the sine and cosine. You just put the numbers. So what you'll do is you'll have 2 times negative 7 over 25 times negative 24 over 25. And then let your calculator do the work for you. You should get 336 divided by 625. And so that would be your answer for number 26. Pretty straightforward. Just type in the calculator and you're good to go for 26. All right, for 27, here's your problem. It wants you to find cosine of 2 theta. Again, you don't have to memorize the formula. Here's the formula for you. It's cosine squared minus sine squared. Again, I tell you that cosine is negative 12 over 13. I tell you where you're at. You're in quadrant 2. So there's my angle. Cosine would be adjacent over hypotenuse. This has got to be negative. And so if you do Pythagorean theorem on this, you should get a positive 5 for this side, and I'll let you do that. So that means sine of this situation is 5 over 13. So now let's just plug it in the formula. Cosine was negative 12 over 13. Don't forget to square it. Minus sine in this case was 5 over 13. Don't forget to square it. If you would type that into your calculator, you could type the whole thing, but I'm trying to do it by hand. You should get 144 minus 25. You should get 119 over 169. And that would be the answer for number 27. So that's pretty straightforward, not too bad. Again, you can type this directly into your calculator and you would get your answer, so you're good to go. All right, 28. For 28, this problem was another sine of 2 theta, so this is great, an extra one of these, why not? So you get 2 sine of theta, cosine of theta. You're in quadrant 1. It tells you that cosine is 4 over 5. I know that this is a 3, 4, 5, so that's it. So then sine of theta would be 3 over 5. Plug it in. Sine of theta is 3 over 5. Cosine of theta is 4 over 5. Multiply 2 times 3 times 4. You get 24 over 25. And that would be your answer for 28. Now, the last two problems, I think, are going to be trig identities where you have to simplify. So those are the ones that are going to, but it's multiple choice, right? So the answer's there. So here's the last two. For 29, really good problem. I took this from another one of the CLEP exams, and it says simplify the following trig identities. What I want you to do is notice the numerator, 1 minus cotangent to the 4th x. Look at the denominator, but I don't want you to start by that. I know that both of these are difference of two squares, which means I could factor both of them, but I want to only factor the numerator. Now, there's a reason why I'm being strategic with this. So if I factor the numerator, guys, that would be 1 minus cotangent squared times 1 plus cotangent squared. Because remember, difference of two squares, you take the square root and you factor it accordingly. Now, again, I wouldn't factor the denominator because, even though it is a dots, I want to say that, even though it is a dots, I wouldn't want to factor the denominator because it's going to defeat the purpose. If you notice, this term is going to cross out with that term, and that just leaves me 1 plus cotangent squared of x. Now, what's going to surprise you on the test tomorrow is that even after you've done that work, that won't be an answer choice, because if you go back and look at one of your Pythagorean identities, there should be an identity, and I'm going to write this out to be sure. Sine squared plus cosine squared is equal to 1. There should be an identity, and I'm going to do this, where it says that 1 plus cotangent squared is equal to cosecant squared. That's one of your identities. So guys, this right here that you just found is technically equal to cosecant squared, and so that's why this would be the answer. So you probably would save yourself because that's not going to be an answer choice. This would be. So just keep that in mind for number 29. All right, last one, number 30. It is another one of these trig identities, and here's the thing about this one. We're going to do, I don't know if Caroline or Leah came up, the butterfly method. I don't remember who came up with that idea, but I use it. So put this over 1, and we're going to do the butterfly method. So sine of x times sine of x is sine squared. Cosine squared times 1, so plus cosine squared, over sine of x times 1 is sine of x. So I call it cross multiply, but butterfly method works for me. Now, that will not be an answer choice because hopefully you recall that sine squared plus cosine squared is automatically equal to what? 1. Even more so, guys, that will not be an answer choice, but I'm going to tell you how I'm going to try and trick you. This would be an answer choice, and if you pick that one, you would be wrong because 1 over sine is not sine. 1 over sine is cosecant, and that would be it. Well, guys, that's it. I promise you if you study this, you're going to be great. Anybody want to say anything before I hit the stop button on the record? Hey, okay, that sounds really good. All right, that's it.